Kennedy.
Hello, Mr. Secretary. I'm over here. How are you?
Good.
Mr. Secretary, as you're also head of the IRS, we've had some tough ice storms. Would you and your colleagues consider an extension on allowing extension to allow people to file taxes a little bit later?
Senator, I've been in touch with the governor of the great state of Louisiana, and he and I and my staff are working on that. It is traditional to grant extensions for events like this.
Good. If Canada came to the United States, well, let me preface this by saying I understand that tariffs have a number of purposes, but the foremost reason for tariffs is to try to stop other countries from taking advantage of us through either their tariffs or trade barriers. If Canada, for example, came to the United States and said, we're going to zero tariffs in the United States. All of them are off on our end. Would you, Mr. President, speaking to our president, go to zero tariffs and then just let Canadian companies and American companies compete on a level playing field?
Absolutely not. As we saw last week, when 2 weeks ago, when Prime Minister Carney went to China, he lowered tariffs on Chinese EVs from 100% to 6%. U.S. has a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. We couldn't let our northern border be used as a way for Chinese EVs to come into the U.S.
Right. Okay. I'm going to lead you a little bit because Senator Scott is a she-bear when it comes to time. The poverty rate, according to the Census Bureau, is 11%, isn't it, in America?
I'll take it. I'll take your word, Senator.
And that's the Census Bureau defines poverty, is it not?
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that the Census Bureau, in defining poverty and determining that our poverty rate is 11%, or 36 million Americans, which makes us look bad, only will consider direct cash payments from the federal government to poor people, such as, let's say, SSI payments or TANF payments?
Correct.
Okay. And isn't it true that the Census Bureau, in determining poverty, doesn't include non-cash payments? It doesn't include Medicaid or food stamps or housing subsidies or refundable tax credits. Isn't that true?
That is correct, Senator.
Yeah. Let me give you an example. Mom, 2 kids, poverty level for her and her kids is $27,000. Mom works part-time. She makes $11,000. According to our Census Bureau, she's poor. She's below the poverty line. But she also receives, she works, I recall I said, makes $11,000 a year. She receives $4,100 in refundable earned income tax credits, $3,400 in refundable child tax credits, which means she gets a check, $9,200 in food stamps, $9,500 in housing subsidies, $900 in utility bill subsidies, $16,000 in Medicaid, $31,000 a year in free school lunches, and $6,000 in TANF payments. If you add that up, that's $64,100 a year, according to math.
I'll believe your arithmetic, Senator.
Okay. But using the Census Bureau's definition of poor, they don't include all these payments. They just include her income and the TANF payment. Does that make sense to you?
No, sir, and you should bring that up with the Commerce Department.
I know, but you've got influence. I know how close you and the Commerce Secretary are. I'm hoping you could bring it up with somebody above.
The president says we're opposites, and I'm tall.
I'm not going to comment on that. Would you talk to the president about this? If you include all cash and non-cash payments, the poverty rate in America is 1%.
That's a good point to end on.
Thank you,
I
Senator.
told you he was a she-bear.
I'm not quite sure for this. Senator Moreno, you and I will talk about the she-bear later. Let's go on to Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I think you would agree that the credibility of the Secretary of the Treasury is important, and I want to give you a chance to retract a statement that you made on national TV. Alex Preddy was shot 10 times and killed by federal agents in Minneapolis. The administration, some administration called him a, quote, domestic terrorist. You suggested that Alex Preddy was culpable in his own killing because he had a gun in his waistband holster, which he was licensed to carry. When asked, you said, quote, I'm sorry this gentleman is dead, but, and you went on to say he had a weapon, suggesting that he was culpable in his own killing. So, Mr. Secretary, today, would you like to retract that statement?
I would not. And would you like to express remorse over the death of Ashley Babbitt here in the Capitol?
Oh, I have expressed remorse over that. So I've done that, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, please don't. So you think, I have other questions, but I actually would have expected you to take this opportunity to rephrase your response to that question. So you think the fact that he legally had a gun justified his killing?
I didn't say that at all.
You said, do you think he was culpable, partly to blame in his own killing because he had a gun?
I did not say that.
I'm asking you a question now. Do you believe he was in any way culpable for his own killing because he legally carried a gun?
Again, this is an FSOC hearing.
Yeah.
So,
but you're the Secretary of the Treasury.
Why don't we talk about financial stability and oversight?
I'm happy to, Mr. Secretary, but your credibility is important. And in that response, you really, I think, let down the country because we expect honesty after that kind of terrible tragedy. Let me ask you about FSOC. I'm glad that you've all established a household resilience committee because people are being financially squeezed from every side. And I've got a whole bunch of quotes here from candidate Donald Trump on the campaign trail. Starting the day I take office, I will rapidly drive down prices and we will make America affordable again. It's interesting he used that phrase since he's been making fun of the affordability phrase recently. But I listened to your exchange with Senator Warren, and the facts show very clearly that inflation has not been eliminated, has it?
Well,
right?
It is undesirable to completely eliminate inflation. What is desirable is to get back to the Fed's 2% target. And for the past 3 months, we've been at 2.1%, Senator.
Yeah. No,
So
but
the 21.5% under the Biden administration.
Now, look, Mr. I know how you're playing games. You're doing the aggregate over the Biden administration. The last few months.
And you are.
No, the number 2.7 is your own number for last year, the year of the Trump administration. So let me ask you.
And you're being a deconstructionist and saying day one.
And great. Well, I'm just reading the president's own statements. I mean,
I'm glad you all have the same talking
Chairman, I
point.
ask unanimous consent that these statements be placed in the record.
Without objection.
All right. Look, Mr. Secretary, you used to believe that tariffs would increase inflation and prices. Isn't that true?
I wrote that in a letter to my investors, but a year before, I also wrote that I thought Senator Warren would be the Democratic presidential nominee.
Okay. But,
So
Mr.
my
Secretary, please.
predictions have been bad.
Please.
Have been bad.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Secretary, it was January 2024. You said that increased tariffs would raise prices.
no,
right?
I said they could, and I also said it would strengthen the dollar, and the opposite has happened.
Yeah.
The
So-
prices have not gone up due to 150 years of data from the San Francisco Fed.
Mr. Secretary, you're
that we-
cherry picking. You're cherry picking numbers. It is a fact that prices continue to go up.
And
I understand
that is
Mr.
desirable over the long term.
I understand that you said just at this hearing that building costs are down. I just want to point out for the record that the National Association of Home Builders said on January 29th, not very long ago, that costs are up. Construction costs account for about 65% of average home prices in 2024. And they say, and I'm quoting, record high for construction costs since the inception of the series in 1998. Not the Biden administration, 1998. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
a 2024 number?
Senator Haggerty?
This is a number from the home builders. I'm happy to share it with you.
Thank you.
Senator Haggerty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Bessent, it's always great to have you here.
Good to see you, Senator.
There's not a day that goes by that I don't get someone complimenting on the great work that you and your team are doing at the Department of Treasury. If you'd like an extra moment to respond to Senator Van Hollen, I would be more than welcome to.
No, I think he speaks for himself.
Okay. Well, Secretary, over the years, excessive and misguided regulation have distorted markets and imposed undue cost on the American people. I'm particularly concerned about this dynamic in our banking system. As you and I wrote together in the Wall Street Journal, Dodd-Frank sought to end, quote, too big to fail. But in fact, it created a regulatory environment in which community banks are, quote, too small to succeed. Policy errors have entrenched the dominance of the largest banks and made it even more difficult for community banks, which lack the market-distorting perception of being too big to fail. For smaller banks, the result has been a bloodbath. The U.S. has lost 3,600 community banks since 2010, nearly a 50% decline in the community banks in our state, in our nation. Secretary, I proposed bipartisan legislation to increase the deposit insurance limit for non-interest-bearing transaction accounts. This is not a wholesale increase in the deposit insurance limit. It's a narrow reform targeting only non-interest-bearing accounts, typically payroll accounts. How does this bill, this targeted expansion of coverage, fit into the administration's vision for supporting community banks?
Senator, as you know, I, along with you, am one of the great, and another member of this committee, they are a great advocate of this because what we have seen is depositors, investors believe that large banks have an implicit guarantee on all of their deposits during a time of crisis, during a stress event. As we saw in March of 2023, deposits flee from small banks because they are not believed to have that implicit guarantee. Mm-hmm. So if we can have an account for which small businesses, normally their payroll accounts, can deposit funds with the surety that they will be returned, then it will stop that deposit beta, allow Main Street to flourish. What we have seen since the great financial crisis, due to overregulation, 50% of community and small banks have disappeared. And that is what is harming Main Street.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary, and I think that's precisely why the National Association of Community Banks have supported my legislation and the legislation you and I wrote about in the Wall Street Journal. Last year, Mr. Secretary, President Trump signed my bill, the Genius Act, into law. Private sector estimates suggest that stablecoin adoption may reach between $1 trillion and $3 trillion by the end of this decade. As you know, the Genius Act requires stablecoins to be backed by high-quality liquid assets, such as U.S. Treasuries. How does the U.S. leadership in crypto and stablecoins fit into Treasury's strategy for maintaining the dollar's role in the center of the global financial system?
Well, Senator, I want to congratulate you and your colleagues, both sides of the aisle, but thank you for your leadership on this. This can be an important source of funding for the U.S. government as we push down the funding for the U.S. government that helps everyday Americans, whether it is for mortgages, they are any other borrowing requirements, keeps taxes low. And we believe that with the U.S. having the safest, soundest, best practices, we can draw in new sources of funding via the stablecoin mechanism.
Mm-hmm. If you think about the impact of the passage of the Genius Act, it was a major statement in terms of keeping innovation on shore. And I'd just like to get your perspective in terms of the stability and clarity that we provided with the Genius Act and what that means for keeping innovative capacity here in America.
Well, it's innovative capacity in digital assets, and remaining the leader in that is imperative. And what we don't want to have are central bank digital assets, which we are seeing in the rest of the world. And Senator, as you and I have often discussed, we are going to see a choice between American private sector assets with our best practices in regulation, or between central bank digital assets, whether in Europe, whether in China, in the rest of the world. And I think the world is going to choose the U.S. dollar and the private sector well-regulated choice that U.S. stablecoins will provide.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I think that underscores my sensitivity to not undoing ex post facto the good work that we did in Genius. I want to see us put in place international reciprocal regimes that work. I want to increase the demand for U.S. Treasuries as you do, and I'm going to encourage my colleagues to preserve the Genius Act, given all the hard work that went into it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good. Thank you for your leadership, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.